Hi, Andrew Bell with you once again. You may have seen some headlines about some restructuring that we're doing here at the Ray White Bell Group. I'll talk more about that in detail in the next edition of E-News. Now, as most of my viewers would be aware, I've been a board member of the Real Estate Institute of Australia for some years now. And our role is to be constantly analysing the real estate market and to be providing advice to various political parties, and in particular the federal government, in relation to housing policy. No one has a better feel for the real estate market than real estate practitioners who know what's happening on the ground on a daily basis, right throughout the Australian marketplace. Obviously, with the federal election now on, we're ramping up our recommendations to all political parties to hopefully have some influence over policy moving forward. Some of the latest research has shown that the national median price per house increased by 0.7% over the final quarter of 24 and up 5.2% over the entire year, taking the median price in Australia $1,058,442 for capital cities. Now, remembering that over 1/3 of Australians rent. So when looking at that part of the market, we see the rents for 3-bedroom dwellings increased by 0.2% over the December quarter, but that was up 6.7% for the full year. And average rent $624 per week. Now, for 2-bedroom dwellings, where the biggest demand is, they increased by 0.3% rents over the December quarter, and was up 7.4% for the 12 months, which came in at a similar amount of $626 per week. Now, of course, rents are driven by supply and demand, and whilst supply keeps falling, tenants have adjusted. For example, where previously maybe a married couple, a couple would have previously rented a 2-bedroom apartment for themselves, many are now joining with other couples, and there are some houses now where there are 3 or 4 couples sharing a house in order to get their weekly rentals down. This has taken some pressure off the rental demand, resulting in vacancy rates over the quarter increasing in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth, whilst they remain stable in Brisbane, Adelaide, and did decrease in Canberra, Hobart and Darwin. A clearer perspective on vacancy is that it's been a long-known factor that a 3% vacancy rate was a balanced market, taking pressure off rental growth and providing a balanced rental market for landlords and tenants. At the moment, the national average vacancy sits at 1.8%. So whilst we are in a situation where supply is still well under the demand, we're going to keep seeing rental increases. Now, an interesting stat from CoreLogic Pain and Gain report shows that Australian homeowners are receiving record profits when selling their properties, with an average gain reaching $306,000, tax-free in most cases. The analysis showed that 94.8% of property sales in the December quarter resulted in a profit, and this marks the highest median nominal gain since CoreLogic began tracking resale data in the mid-1990s. Despite the record high profits, the proportion of sellers making a gain declined slightly from 95.1% in the previous quarter. This did reflect a minor decrease in home values at the end of 2024, following a very long protracted period of high interest rates. Among capital cities, Brisbane recorded the highest percentage of profit-making sales, according to CoreLogic reports, with 99.1% of properties selling above their previous purchase prices. Maybe no surprise. The total resale profit for the quarter reached $35.6 billion, which is up from $35 billion in the previous quarter. The average holding time for profitable sales was 9.3 years, compared to 7.6 years for those that recorded loss-making transaction. Obviously, the longer you hold it, the better. Now, all of these figures were based on 95,300 sales recorded in the 3 months ending December, and certainly reminds us that there is no safer investment than the real estate market. 3 other quick bits of information for today. CPI slowed to 2.4% in February, but we continue to see the battle between headline inflation and core inflation. But there is growing pressure on the RBA for another 0.25% drop. It's unlikely to happen during the midst of an election campaign, and so whilst it hasn't happened here at the beginning of April, we don't expect it to happen now before June, if lucky. In the meantime, we'll need to watch for further data on inflation, which has had a habit over the last couple of years of bouncing up and down. The federal budget was a little underwhelming for housing. Whilst it may sound politically attractive to tighten foreign buyer limits for 2025, that just means we're also blocking potential supply for rental properties because many of those foreign investors buy properties and then rent them out. The other significant factor is so many developers depend on a percentage of foreign investment sales in order to give them the confidence to proceed to build developments. And so capping foreign investors also means it will undermine the likely number of properties that are going to be built. Capping a percentage of any project makes sense, but just limiting foreign buyers as a whole doesn't. Not much else in the budget that makes any significant difference to our housing crisis, so let's hope that during the election campaign there may be some more focus on some significant help for the housing market. Lastly, congratulations to the Gold Coast. Tourism Research Australia reveals two amazing milestones. First, visitor spending for the calendar year 2024 hit a record $8.1 billion. And that came from a record 13 million visitors to the Gold Coast. We outperformed both Queensland as a state and Australia as a whole in growth and in expenditure. But within Australia, New South Wales visitors set a record with 1.3 million visitors for the year, up and is usually Victoria. But it might surprise some as well that the Sunshine Coast poured in, bringing 249,000 visitors. That was up from 185,000 the previous year. From overseas, the number one market was the Kiwis, with New Zealand pumping in 222,000 visitors, which was also up from 201,000 the previous year. There is so much more to do right now following Cyclone Alfred to get our tourism back on. Naturally, it not only prevented 95,000 people from arriving at the Gold Coast Airport, which was closed for 3 days, but it also made other people think about alternative plans, at least in the short term. So there's a big tourism drive underway at the moment, which should see us bumping up our tourist numbers for the Easter period and right through our beautiful winter months. Now, don't forget to book for the Business Meets Sports lunch on Friday the 30th of May at the Star Casino. This event has been a sellout every year as we interview leading sports identities and continue in our Local Billionaire series, where we get some hugely prominent business leaders who came from nothing to incredible successful business careers that generated multi-billion dollars in wealth. Details are on screen now to secure your seat for a fabulous afternoon. That's it. See you in a fortnight's time.